Welcome back to the Exposure Stories. The world of cinema has yet to recover from the news that Diane Keaton, the woman who turned difference into an icon, has passed away forever. Amid flowers, lights, and millions of words of mourning, one voice rose above the rest, that of her daughter, Dexter, the girl Diane had once loved as her own flesh and blood. For the first time, Dexter spoke out, her voice trembling with both grief and quiet anger, revealing the hidden corners of her mother's life that the world had never known. "My mother was a woman who loved deeply," she said, "but she lived with a regret that never faded. Her heart endured more cracks than anyone could imagine. Throughout her life, Diane longed for love but often chose solitude. She was the woman who could light up any room, who smiled brightly for cameras, yet in the quiet of her home was often just a woman staring into the past, where old letters, yellowed photographs, and unfinished love still lingered." In her words, Dexter made a devastating accusation, that Hollywood, the place that once adored her mother, abandoned her in the end. When illness tormented her, not a single person came to visit. The whole world acted as if she had already died. So who was Diane Keaton, truly? Behind those endless smiles and eccentric hats lived a woman of immense strength, vulnerability, and longing. Diane adopted her first child, Dexter Dean, in 1996 when she was 50 and at the height of her career. The decision shocked Hollywood. Keaton had never married and famously joked that her longest relationship was with her work. Yet after years of glamour and complex roles, she realized that what was missing wasn't romance but the simple chance to love and care for someone unconditionally. "I don't need to give birth to her to be her mother," she once said. "I just need to love her." 4 years later, in 2001, she adopted her son Duke, "the second gift of my life," she called him. Having two small children at home completely transformed her. Early mornings, bedtime stories, school drop-offs, all brand new to a woman who once declared that being alone made her happy. But she quickly discovered that the joy of motherhood far outweighed any cinematic triumph. Friends recalled how Diane was a devoted, protective mother who fiercely guarded her children's privacy. She wanted them to grow up free, unburdened by fame. To her, peace was more important than glory, kindness more valuable than fame. To the world, Diane Keaton was an Oscar-winning actress and fashion icon. But to Dexter and Duke, she was simply Mom, the woman who made them breakfast, picked their clothes for school, and asked each night, "What made you happy today?" She wasn't perfect, but her authenticity and quiet gestures made her children feel deeply loved. After her passing, Dexter couldn't bear to read the endless tributes written about her mother. "They were all so sincere," she said, "but still they didn't know her. No one knew the gentle woman who sat beside her children when life felt too heavy, who filled silence with comfort instead of words." When people once asked Diane why she chose to become a single mother so late in life, she laughed softly. "I didn't choose the timing, I chose love." But every legend carries secrets. After Diane's death, Dexter discovered a leather-bound notebook in her mother's study, tied with a silver ribbon and faintly perfumed. Inside were pages that breathed with longing, pages filled with the name of one man, Al. As Dexter read, she stepped into her mother's hidden world, one built on love and silence. "I loved him with everything I had," Diane had written. It was 1971, the set of The Godfather, where a radiant young actress met Al Pacino, the man whose deep, unreadable eyes would change her life. "He made me feel like a 25-year-old girl forever," she wrote. Their connection was instant and electric. In those days they laughed, drove through Los Angeles at night with Sinatra's "Fly Me to the Moon" playing, her feet on the dashboard, her hair tangled in the wind. But fame crept in like a shadow. He began to disappear for weeks without a word, and she waited by the phone, terrified to call again. "Maybe if I stayed long enough he would love me the way I loved him," she wrote. By 1990 in Rome, Diane gave him an ultimatum: marriage or goodbye. His silence was answer enough. That night she stood by the window watching the city lights flicker, knowing it was over. She left the next morning and never saw him again. For years afterward, she would sit in her armchair watching The Godfather, smiling faintly whenever Michael Corleone appeared on screen, the man she could only keep in fiction. On her desk, she kept a framed, yellowed note from Pacino: "You're the one I loved most, always will." In her wallet, she kept a photo of him, candid and young, beside pictures of her children. Every year on his birthday, she disappeared for a few hours. She never said where she went, only left a note on the fridge, a day for things long gone. Once when asked which man she remembered most, Diane smiled and said simply, "Al, always." Perhaps that was why she chose to live alone, pouring her love instead into her children, love without fear, without expectation. "Mom loved us as if she were mending a crack in her own heart," Dexter said. In her later years, Diane found solace in small joys, gardening, cooking, and looking through old photographs. She texted her children each morning, little notes like, "Have you had water?" Or, "It's a beautiful day, don't forget to take a walk." Those small gestures have now become the biggest absences. But time, always cruel, began to take its toll. The woman who once glowed on red carpets grew frail. Years of battling skin cancer had left scars, her hands trembling as she lifted her morning tea. She smiled through pain, hiding exhaustion behind gentle humor. More painful still was the invisible illness she had long fought: bulimia, the eating disorder that haunted her since her 20s. "I loved beauty," she wrote once, "but beauty was what destroyed me." Yet even through sleepless nights and fatting strength, she kept her grace. In her final months, she refused hospitals and caretakers. "I want to leave this world in the place where I laughed, loved, and raised my children," she said. Dexter and Duke cared for her, playing her favorite jazz records as she hummed along, her voice fragile but peaceful. In her bedside drawer, Dexter found a final note titled "Things I'm Grateful For." "Breakfast with my children, sunsets over the rooftop, the feeling of being loved even once is enough for a lifetime." At the bottom, one last line: "I have lived and I have loved. The rest, let the light keep for me." On the morning of October 11, 2025, the California sun rose softly over her Brentwood home. Diane sat in her armchair, a cup of tea beside her, her glasses resting on an open journal. She had been writing about love. When Dexter entered, she found her mother still, her face serene, her breath gone quietly into eternity. The statement released was brief: Diane Keaton passed away peacefully at her home, surrounded by light and love. That night, candles flickered in the garden she had planted herself. No cameras, no ceremony, only family, music, and words beneath her favorite tree. Outside her home, fans gathered with flowers, candles, and handwritten signs that read, "You made us brave enough to be ourselves." Tributes poured in from across Hollywood. Al Pacino, her once great love, wrote simply, "She was the quiet mirror of my heart." Meryl Streep, Steve Martin, Woody Allen, Bette Midler, and countless others spoke of her wit, her honesty, her courage. The Academy aired a tribute reel. Scenes from Annie Hall read something: "Gotta give her laughter and vulnerability filling the screen once more." Over a soft piano track, Diane's voice echoed one last time, "Love is the greatest risk of all." Across theaters and living rooms, even strangers wept, not just for her, but for the part of themselves she helped them recognize. To understand Diane Keaton is to understand the silence that shaped her. Born in Los Angeles in 1946, she grew up in a world of polished smiles and hidden pain. Her father, strict and disciplined; her mother, a radiant beauty queen whose dreams faded into domesticity. Watching her mother's light dim, Diane vowed never to live by others' expectations. At 20, she left for New York, taking her mother's maiden name as both tribute and rebellion. In the cold streets of Manhattan, she scraped by waiting tables, auditioning barefoot, sometimes surviving on tea and half a slice of bread. But the stage gave her freedom. Acting wasn't performance, it was survival. Under the harsh lights of Hair on Broadway, Diane found her truth. From that moment she rose. The Godfather in 1972 made her a star. Annie Hall in 1977 made her a legend. Her quirks, her awkward charm, her oversized suits, they weren't a persona, they were her. Yet the brighter the light, the darker the loneliness. Success became a cage. She worked tirelessly, afraid to stop, her laughter hiding exhaustion. By Reds in 1981, she had poured out everything. When it ended, she sat in her car and cried, not from sadness but from emptiness. Still, she carried on, rebuilding herself through directing, writing, and preserving historic homes. "Applause fades," she once said, "but the work, that's what saves you." And save her it did. With an estimated fortune of over $100 million, every dollar was earned by her hands and spirit. Her Brentwood estate, a masterpiece she designed herself, remains untouched, preserved by Dexter and Duke as her living legacy. Diane was more than an actress. She was an artist, an architect of emotion. She restored homes, championed female artists, and donated much of her art collection to LACMA to ensure women's creativity would never be forgotten. For nearly half a century, Diane Keaton was Hollywood's conscience, a woman who laughed through pain, who turned imperfection into art, who wore sincerity as her greatest armor. Emma Stone once said, "Diane made women believe they could be both intelligent and strange." Anne Hathaway called her the compass of courage. Every actress who dares to be herself walks in her footsteps. In the end, her daughter Dexter wrote the words that summed up a lifetime. "If I could choose again, I would still choose to be her daughter, even for just one more day." Diane Keaton was more than a star. She was proof that imperfection can be beautiful, that love, even when it ends in silence, can light up the world forever.